A very bipartisan spirit today at this ceremony. We have Republicans and Democrats coming together to remember a man, a president who, in his inaugural address, called for a kinder, a gentler nation. Is that a message to the world today?
Of course it is, and I think it's more relevant than it probably ever has been before. And George Herbert Walker Bush what really was a president that tried to govern in that traditional bipartisan way that we've seen increasingly less of in recent years, and you can see the Washington establishment really coming together to try and celebrate his legacy, but also to cement that kind of bipartisanship in an era where we see precious little of it.
Now, there aren't just national politicians who are there today at this funeral service. Many foreign leaders, Prince Charles, Angela Merkel of Germany, leaders from Jordan, Australia, Poland. How was George Bush Sr. seen on the world stage?
Well, George Bush Sr. was someone who was very committed to the international system, and you know, it's no surprise that he had also been, for example, ambassador to the UN. His probably signature foreign policy achievement was countering Iraqi aggression in Kuwait, and he masterfully assembled an international coalition to fight that aggression, and these leaders clearly have not forgotten that style of American leadership.
Now, you yourself worked in Kuwait during the Bush administration. What are your memories of that time, and what messages you got from the president?
Well, I do remember having a very odd experience when I was working in Kuwait. This was just a few months after the liberation, and a very energized crowd. The Arab street was marching down the street and marching onto the American embassy. And as a diplomat overseas, I was a little worried about that until I heard what they were saying, and they were chanting, "Long live George Bush! Long live George Bush!" And he was able to unite the international community in that way, even bringing in folks that weren't always friends of the United States.
But George H.W. Bush was a one-term president. Lots of international success, perhaps not so much success at home.
Yeah, and in part of his inability to convince the American people was due to that bipartisan approach that he had. He had promised very famously during the campaign that there would be no new taxes. Concerned about budget deficits, he worked with Democrats to raise taxes, and that really came back to bite him in the election in 1992.
Also the father of another president, George W. Bush. What do you know about their relationship and how much influence he had on his son as president?
Well, there's been a tremendous amount of speculation around that. What's clear is that the two men deeply loved each other, as a father and son normally would. Some have talked about competition or a younger George Bush sort of in the shadow of his father. I did have the opportunity to spend some time with George Bush's son, and he spoke only in the most glowing terms of his dad. And at the end of the day, whatever their differences on Iraq policy or whatever else, they both shared a unique and singular burden and had that bond that so few men have ever shared, so few actors on the international stage.
Jeffrey, how do you think George Herbert Walker Bush will be remembered?
I think he will be remembered as he's being remembered today, as someone that tried to unite the American people, someone who saw service to country, whether in war as a young man or subsequently in all of his major government positions, someone who saw that service as an honorable thing, someone who tried to assemble not only his people, but America's allies around the world.
Thank you so much for coming in to speak to us, Jeffrey Hawkins, former U.S. Ambassador. Thank you.
Thank you.